Ladies and gentlemen, let's gaming today video. I have more thoughts and opinions concerning Nintendo's new 3DS. I've been mulling it over, and I have to say that personally I feel that you should be mad at Nintendo for the name of the console, for the marketing of the console, but I don't think you should be pissed off with the fact that the console is being released. Allow me to further expand on that. Now, I've also wrote a rather large accompanying article for this. You can check it out if you wish. It's linked in the video's description. Now, in it, I've actually added some visual cues. I've actually wrote down all of the release dates from Japan of the various handhelds, and I've also put in the basic specifications for you, and also wrote a lot of extra stuff that you can go ahead and check out, and some images and some other shiners if you so desire. But I'll go over a couple of the main points in this video anywho. So, of course, Nintendo have announced that there will be a new 3DS being released. Now, the really bad part of this is that it's just craply named. It's awfully named. I've been reading over comments from the internet, which, as you can imagine, is a risky business at best. And I've also been speaking to owners of 3DS on the RGT crew. We've actually got 2 or 3 of them. I've been asking them, hey, what do you think of this? And there seems to be a lot of division on how people are taking the news. And I don't feel it's because the console is another console being released. And I'll tell you why. Now, let's travel back. Come with me into the DeLorean for a moment and travel with me back into 1989. That was when the 2-button, green screen, and D-pad were come together to release the original Game Boy. Now, if you feel very old and sad right now, then I don't blame you. However, 1998 was when the Game Boy Light sprang to life, and then very shortly thereafter, in fact, just at Christmas time, so from April when the Game Boy Light came up, you've now got Game Boy Color coming out just a little bit later on. So the Game Boy Color appears about the point of, Christmas. So you've got, from April to Christmas, you've got another Game Boy. Now, the Color actually has additional RAM and stuff, so when you think about it, the Game Boy Light comes out, in April. It's basically just a shrunk down version of the original Game Boy, which has been out since 1989. Think about that. You almost got 10 years between the 2 consoles. Right, I'm rounding things up, obviously. Then, from April to Christmas, you've got another Game Boy. Now, the Game Boy Color, as I mentioned, has additional RAM, a better CPU. Well, it's also color, and of various other shiners. Now, from Christmas 98 to 2001, we see another Game Boy. This one is called the Game Boy Advanced. Now, the Advanced has a massively improved color display. Rather than just a couple of colors, a couple of dozen, it's now capable of thousands. It's got a better CPU, memory, lots more video memory, it's got better GPU, so on and so forth and so forth. So that's pretty cool. Now, as I said, that was just about, slightly less than 3 years. And once again, of course, there's going to be exclusive games on this one. Okay, there were a couple of incremental upgrades as well. For example, the Advanced SP, but for all intents and purposes, they're exactly the same. There's just improvements on the battery life or the size or whatever, basically for portability and usability functions. Okay, so now, fast forward another 3 years, roughly. We're in November 2004. Out comes the DS. From kilobytes of RAM, we actually go to 4 megabytes of RAM. I know, astounding, right? There's larger cartridge support, there's 2 screens, and a bunch of other crap that, of course, goes with this. Now, obviously, this light version of the Game Boy does have exclusive... this version of the Game Boy does have exclusive versions, and once again, a light version is released just a little bit later in March 2006. So, roughly 18 months later on. Once again, you can almost guess what I'm going to say. Focus on portability, battery life, and all the other bits and pieces. From March 2006, with the release of the Lite, We now see in November 2008 the introduction of the DSi, and 1 year after that, once again rounding it up, November 2009, comes out the DSi XL. The CPU speed of these two roughly is doubled, memory expands from 4 megabytes to 16 megabytes, which is pretty profound when you think about it for a year. And additionally, we'll also see the inclusion of front-facing cameras, additional storage solutions, much better battery life, and so on. Okay, now we're getting slightly more present. It's now February 2011. And out comes the 3DS. RAM expands from 16 megabytes to 128. Screen resolution increases by an insane amount. You've got a much better CPU. In fact, not only is it faster, it's also a dual-core ARM processor. Meanwhile, from February 2011, the XL is released in 2012 July. And then the 2DS is released in October 2013. The reason, of course, the 2DS was released was to tackle the criticisms of not only the pricing of the console, but also the fact that, to be honest with you, many would agree that the 3D sucked on the machine. Okay, so now we're in 2014, or 15 if you're living outside of Japan, and we're getting the new 3DS. And guess what? Faster CPU, better battery life, extra buttons, and of course all the other gubbins that you'd expect from a new console. My point being, and it's a rather long-winded point, Nintendo and their release of upgrades, aside from the original Game Boy, the very original, from 89 to like the late 90s, it's a pretty consistent thing. You're seeing basically a new Game Boy released, then there's improvements to it, then a new Game Boy. So it's like, for example, Game Boy 1, then 1.5, then 1.7, then 2, then 2.5, then 2.7, then 3, and so on. It's a pretty obvious pattern, and you can see this, once again, in the graph, but you could probably visualize it anyway, to be honest. I don't feel that Nintendo has a problem with the release of the new 3DS. I just feel that they've given it the worst name possible. It's actually named so poorly that it's actually giving the Wii U a run for its money. I mean, the Wii and the Wii U are easily two of the worst named consoles they could have done, or thought of, or ever hoped to create. It would be the equivalent of if Sony were naming the console for Nintendo. That's actually the name that I'd expect, just so that basically you give your competitor the worst name possible. Because the names, immediately, as soon as it was announced, people were calling it the piss, the urine, the urinal, the monkey piss, when of course this is back when, The Rock was really big in the WWE. God knows the amount of insults that console just... It's lucky it wasn't a person, because if it was Googling its own name, it would have been in tears. It would have suffered some mental trauma, I swear to God. Then the Wii U comes out, and worse, the Wii U is considered to be, by many, a controller for the original Wii. Why is this? Because, frankly speaking, Nintendo continue to push images of the controller first. And not only do they continue to do this, the name just doesn't really sound like a new console. And now, for the love of God, now, after all the criticism from gamers, from journalists, from enthusiast press such as us on YouTube, even though I freaking hate the term enthusiast press, it makes me want to punch a kitten. Well, maybe not, because kittens are cute, but it certainly makes me want to slap someone. Nintendo are like, well, we don't really feel that the problem was with the original Wii name, despite the fact that pretty much everyone's telling you that's the problem. Allow me to give you an insight, right? If millions of people, quite literally, are telling you your naming sucks, but you are the only one that's like, nope, it's actually not that, we're just marketing it wrong. Yes, because you're naming it wrong. No, it's not the name. You could just kind of start frowning at this point. So now they release a console that's even more confusing, at least arguably with the name Wii U. It has something else, right? That you could see a kind of a letter, something different. But to say a new 3DS, allow me to give you an insight of how this is going to go if you are a shop assistant in a store. And I'm not a store shop assistant, but you could just imagine the comedy skits already, right? So let's just, for example, assume that the console is released, let's just say February in 2015, just for example. Now, I'm working in a store, right, just for example, and a customer comes in and they say, well, I'm actually pretty annoyed because this game isn't working, I need a new version. Immediately you look at the case and you say, oh, what are you using? I'm using a 3DS. Are you using the new 3DS or the 3DS? I bought my console in Christmas, so of course it's a new 3DS. No, sir. Actually, you've got the older 3DS. There's a new 3DS out. The new 3DS is its model. It's not going to go well. It's a marketing disaster, and it's going to get people really annoyed. And you've got to remember, while you may scoff, and you may say to yourselves, well, how could they not know? First of all, this doesn't account for parents who are a major buyer of these type of handheld devices. Also, a lot of casual gamers do buy items like, well, handhelds. All you have to do is go travel to, say, London, outside of London, and then travel to London on train and just look at the commuters, or I imagine it would be the same in New York or whatever. You could just see people everywhere playing on these damn things, because what else are you going to do? In other words, they are perfect as, hey, what am I going to be doing? In the meanwhile, I might as well do this. So my point being with this, people are not associating the name as a different console. They're not thinking of it as a successor to the Wii. In fact, I was actually discussing this with someone on Facebook, a viewer, just today, and he actually said, I don't know what this is even supposed to be. Is it supposed to be a next generation version of the 3DS? Is it supposed to be like a 1.5 version of the 3DS? What is it? And that's not a good position to be in, because obviously he watches this channel, and this channel is fairly niche. It's not going to be the typical channel a lot of people are going to be watching, because it's, well, very much into the technical analysis side of things. It's going into, you know, what's going on in the gaming media as a whole. It's going into, like, journalism. It's going into critique. And so, you know, I wouldn't exactly say we are on the level of Total Biscuit or anything like that, but I'm just saying it's like Total Biscuit is also kind of a niche, which is to say that he appeals probably to, say, a less wide audience than, say, IGN would. My point being that if this viewer and other viewers like him on websites like NeoGAF, and you can, you know, check those comments out, you can also read on other message boards, they're like, why did they do this? It just makes no sense. And this is a problem that I think Nintendo have had recently. They just, I don't honestly know why they would do this as a decision in terms of the naming. They should have made it very clear. Because here's the problem. People are just associating this with, oh, it's the same game, it's the same thing, it's just got a slightly higher CPU clock, and that Nintendo were just doing this so that they can grab our money for a new console. And that's how people are seeing it. In fact, most people are even ignoring things such as the new C-Stick. They're ignoring the NFC capabilities, which admittedly I think's kind of gimmicky anyway, but that's just my personal opinion. They're ignoring stuff like the micro SD slot and so on. So in other words, a lot of this is just kind of falling by the wayside, and everyone's just focused on the fact that it's got a slightly faster CPU, and all of this is down to Nintendo, which is, I think anyway, a symptom of the major problem that Nintendo have, and that's just that they're bad with public relations and they're bad with marketing. At least in my humble opinion. So as I said, don't be mad at the fact that Nintendo are releasing a new console, because it's pretty much fitting in with their usual and standard release cycle. Instead, just tell Nintendo, honestly, you suck at communicating with your fans. You need to fix this. Anyway, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye for now.